Hello, I'm Yinka Bikini and welcome to Out of Frame. On this podcast, we are waving the baton for below-the-line crew members. That's everyone on a TV or film set that helps bring a production to life. From the artistic eye of the makeup department to the heavy lifting of a gaffer and their team. I'll be meeting incredibly talented individuals who love film just as much as you do. And I'll be introducing you to a side of the industry you've never quite seen before. This is Out of Frame. In this episode, I'm joined by someone who works with the very building blocks that it takes to make a film. Can I get a lights, camera, action, anyone? Because here with me in the CrewHQ studio today is cinematographer James Friend. As a cinematographer, James is head of both the camera and lighting departments on a film or television production. He works closely with the director to translate everything in the script into a visual format, from camera placements to post-production. No one quite sees a film through to a final vision like the cinematographer. James, welcome to Out of Frame.
Thank you very much for having me.
How are you feeling today?
Yeah, good.
Good. So I'm really excited to speak to you today. We've got some vintage cameras behind us. Do you approve?
Definitely. In fact, that's the first 16mm camera that I ever shot on. It's an Arri S. It's a wonderful, wonderful bit of kit.
You learn something new here every day. Of course, there's popcorn on the table that you are allowed to have a munch on as well.
Thank you.
We've got some old school film rolls going on here, some old fashioned film stock rolls. So I hope that you feel right at home.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah? Before we get into the role and responsibility of a cinematographer, I would love to find out more about who James Friend is. Great name, by the way.
Thank you.
Got it from your parents. So I'm going to ask you a few questions which will help paint a picture of your personality through your love of film. Mm-hmm. Question 1. What's the last film that you watched that really inspired you?
The last film that I watched that really moved me, I would say, was Dune. The most recent iteration of it. I thought that from a craftsperson's perspective, as well as a directorial feat, I think it was absolutely stunning. There was just absolutely no weak link in that film whatsoever. And I think that it's a kind of masterclass of interpreting a novel that was originally supposed to be unfilmable because it was just so grand and so complex. But it's a beautiful film.
I hosted the premiere of it. I remember reading it and thinking, this is something that they're never going to be able to make an adaptation of this. And then seeing the triumph. But for me, it was the triumph of, little changes that you have to make in a scene or a script to still make the story make sense. But for you, I guess it's a different point of view. You're looking at it artistically, stylistically, how they've shot it as well.
Yeah, very much. I mean, the truth is, I got into this business because I love cinema. But the second I shot my first film or short or looked behind the curtain of how to make movies, it does really affect your viewing experience. There are some films that I look at and I'm just literally looking at the lighting, and the best ones are the ones where you really do get to melt away as an audience member and sort of appreciate the whole craft of it all.
What would the title of your biopic be?
I would say The Weakest Bladder in Show Business. I'm known for needing to go to the toilet every 5 seconds, and it's I think it drives directors and ADs up the wall. But when you got to go, you got to go.
Okay, so James, let's get into exactly what a cinematographer does. Imagine it's day one. The film's been commissioned. It's go time. Everyone's really excited. What is your first step when it comes to a production? My
first step should always be interpreting the script. That's where the very first sort of blueprint of the film starts to unfold. And I try and read it in a sort of non-technical way as much as one can, and just literally visualize it like if you're reading a novel or something like that. And then I tend to reread it again and start applying sort of certain techniques and things like that I feel like I would utilize. It's not just about interpreting a script, it's also the director's vision. So you need to make sure that you're kind of in this symbiotic kind of dance that you feel like you can bring something to the table. And, even myself as a cinematographer, I need directing. So this is the cool thing about being a DP, I think, or a cinematographer, is because it's a craft. It's both artistic and it's technical. So you do get cinematographers that are more one or the other, but the first steps in pre-production are analysing the script, breaking it down with the director, trying to find a visual language, a palette that you can sort of constantly draw from, and also the most I think the most exciting thing about the business is the collaboration. So I always work extremely closely with the production design department and the art department, because I'm only as good as what I point the camera at.
And what about lighting? Because I can imagine that is a big part of what you're involved in. What are the building blocks towards a shoot day?
I came from the electrical department originally, so I'm very lighting sympathetic, to be honest. And it's also where I really thrive. That's where I kind of get my rocks off a little bit. The camera work side of things is obviously absolutely intrinsic, and but the truth is you can't have good lighting without capturing it with a camera. Basically,
you
vice
can't
versa.
capture the magic without the light.
Exactly. On the first days, I normally sit down with my gaffer once we've got a plan of the set, and I do a lighting plan on paper. Basically, just very, very, very rudimentary.
Is it old school, like with pencils and everything?
Yeah, I've still got a paper diary in my bag. Do you know what I mean?
I knew I liked you.
Yeah, I find that even just writing things down or drawing something, it kind of goes deeper into my sort of
I'm exactly
subconscious.
The same.
But that's because I'm like, I don't know, I've got all sorts of things wrong with me. So I'm dyslexic, I'm slightly autistic, so I need to
feel it. You need to feel it.
Yeah, and the other thing is when you're in a position that you've actually got a finished set, just taking that quiet moment, that quiet time of just sitting in the set alone, preferably, and just soaking it all in and kind of having that time to meditate, because on day one of production, it's going to have 150 people in there. That's how I approach things. If we were to walk in here, for example,
on this gorgeously lit set.
Oh no, it's done quite nicely. But you can't see what the light is doing if you've got 5 lights all turned on. You need to sort of mold it, and it's like sort of molding something out of clay. So that's what I do, and then try and to be really honest, I talk about going in with a plan, which you have to do, but I kind of make it up as I go along as well. Like, people think that I've got all the answers and I know exactly how this film's going to look and all this. Sometimes on the first day of production, I don't have a bloody clue.
I find that so interesting, because what you're describing as a role is something that's really specific and quite hands-on in terms of what you have to do, but also you have to keep the big picture in your mind all of the time, because I can imagine that it can be quite easy to get lost in the weeds of what you're doing and sort of forget that it's not just about the way the light hits, like this glass, for instance. It's about the whole scene, but this is just as important as the whites of your eyes or this or whatever it is.
Every decision that you make has to be in service of the story. So you have to be able to see something, and also light is complemented by shadow. So if you think about these sort of great pictures, films like The Godfather, that it's obviously so iconic and so spoken about. But if Vito Corleone's office was brightly lit like this, he wouldn't be anywhere near as mysterious at the very beginning of the movie.
A cinematographer is very much a leadership role. There's a lot of people that make up your team and that look to you essentially to tell them what the next step is. Could you give us a bit of a breakdown on who those people are and the conversations that you have with them? I know you mentioned the gaffer, who's really important, but who else populates that world for you?
So fundamentally, the cinematographer is in charge of, or the head of department of 3, and sort of 3.5, maybe 4 departments. So you've got naturally the camera department, where that's kind of led by the camera operator who will work with me under my instructions. But then,
how many people are in the camera department?
You may need to put 5 cameras on a, if you're going to shoot something that's blowing up or something like that, or a stunt where you only really want to do it once or maybe twice because of the sort of nature of the risks involved. So it can vary, but as a sort of a general rule, I think there's normally A and B camera, and then the crew that sort of facilitate that, and trainees and things like that. So I'd say about 10.
So you got the camera department, and then what are the other 2?
So the other 2 are the grip department, and so they are basically the key grip is sort of in charge anything that supports the camera, if it be a head of some description, either a fluid head or a remote head or a geared head or whatever. And then anything that is supporting that, so like the dolly or the tripod, or there's infinite sort of things these days that's involved. So it's really camera support, when and how to move the camera and figure out how to do that safely and efficiently. And then the third department is lighting, and this is where I kind of mainly sort of grew up in, I suppose. But that is kind of what it is. It says on the tin. It's working with the cinematographer, the gaffer, working with the cinematographer to also figure out the look of the set, and how if you shoot a scene all throughout the day, or alternatively you may shoot one scene over 3 days. And the light coming through that window, it needs to be consistent.
You speak so calmly about this magnanimous job that you have. It's so interesting, because I feel sitting on this side, it is such a big job that a cinematographer undertakes. What's the largest production or the most people that you've been responsible for at one time?
There could be 50 people just in the just in the camera department at that point. But then even, the infrastructure, the support of the riggers, for example, and the extra grips and things like that. So the cinematographer could at one point be in charge of like over 100 people. It is quite. You say I'm calm. I talk calmly about it. To be honest, on the inside, I'm a nervous wreck. So
you're not a swan.
Yeah, exactly. I wouldn't say as elegant as a swan, but I definitely am quite an anxious person. But yeah, I just try and show a facade of calmness. I mean, it's what we do at the end of the day. We're all illusionists, aren't we? Do you know what I mean? So I'm just painting an illusion that I'm actually calm, but I'm not.
It's a very convincing picture. I don't know how healthy, but a very convincing picture. Do you remember the first time that you picked up a camera, like what you shot? Do you have a memory of it?
I remember my parents basically buying me a Handycam, and I was determined to try and sort of teach myself, basic editing and things like that. That's really what I did until I went to film school. At film school, they introduced me to the idea of motion picture film itself, celluloid. And yeah, that's where it kind of started from a sort of professional level. But yeah, I do remember picking up the camera, and now everyone's got a camera on their phones. But subconsciously it teaches you how to frame, how to compose a shot. I'm sure we'll be a lot more confident at framing than someone, say, 30 years ago, because everyone's obsessed with social media and, taking selfies and all this kind of stuff and balanced frames, where as before, if you'd have a stills camera, you'd have to process the film and all that kind of stuff. And we actually most likely take more photos and videos than ever, in history. So,
definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. James, I know the most recent production that you worked on is Ballad of a Small Player, which comes out very soon. Mm-hmm. So it's a psychological thriller that follows the fortunes of a high-stake gambler. Can you tell me a little bit more about what people can expect from the movie?
The way sort of Edward, the director, and I like to approach it was this kind of fever dream look to the whole thing. Really quite wacky, pretty out there, pretty kind of distorted. And we really wanted it to be like an opera, basically. And the whole thing was shot on location in Macau and Hong Kong. And it's starring Colin Farrell and Tilda Swinton. What was great about filming in Macau and Hong Kong is everything illuminates at night. So it kind of gives you this huge canvas, this like patchwork quilt of all these different colours. So you can kind of exploit the colour a little bit more, and actually you can justify it a bit more. Where if you could walk into a room and I could light the whole thing just primary red, and almost I don't even have to justify it because it's just such an insane, wacky place. It's the gambling capital of the world, basically. It's like Vegas, but crazier, I think.
What is the most fun part of making that kind of film?
By nature of what we do, we always are looking to put the audience in a spectacular, fresh place. There's, people are always looking for new content and things like that. So by nature, end up going to some crazy places. I mean, we found a underground theatre in the middle of London, in Angel, and this place was huge. I mean, it was like 4 stories underground. We were going to film there and use it as a sort of strange location, but you could be, as a DP or any filmmaker really, you could end up going to Buckingham Palace, you could end up shooting in the Houses of Parliament, you could end up going to places which are not normally accessible to the public because of just the nature of what we do, really.
James, on this podcast, we like to pull back the curtain and explore what working below the line really looks like. One way that we do that here at CrewHQ is with a little feature I like to call Object of the Week, in that exact tone. You've brought something in with you today that helps really showcase the work of a cinematographer. James, what do you have with you on Out of Frame?
This is a pouch that contains, firstly, my go-to. Sorry, so that's basically a gaffer's glass.
I've seen one before.
Yeah, this one has actually got a special welding glass. A welder's glass, so I can look at the sun and judge what the clouds are doing. Or alternatively, I can set the hot spot of a light. So if I'm looking at that, instead of just being blinded by the source itself, you can actually see the sort of filament as such.
Yeah, because we had a gaffer come in on the podcast, and when I was using it, you could actually see sort of like the bulbs in the light exactly where they're shining and stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at, you can see all the individual sort of LEDs.
They're green.
And then I've got my light meter itself, which gives me a reading of light in foot candles, or it can also translate how the camera will view that light, essentially that intensity of light, through something called a T-stop or a transmission stop. So I'll program the ISO or the sensitivity of the film stock or whatever, or the sensor into this, and it tells me where to put the exposure on the lens. And then I've got a pen, which you should always never leave home without, and a laser pen. So I can point at lights, and instead of basically just going that one over there, no, not the one to the left, not the one to... A laser pen is one of the most handy objects to have. And I do think that every cinematographer should always carry a sun compass of some description to see the trajectory of the sun and at what time it sets and things like that, because that's a pretty integral part of what we do.
I feel like I could use a laser pen for trying to point out the chocolate bar that I want in the shop. But do you know what? It all comes in this handy pouch as well.
Yeah, it sits on my belt, and then everything to hand. But so yeah, that's the sort of basic toolkit of a cinematographer, I feel.
Would you say that this is something that, for any cinematographer, it's their bread and butter? Like it's sort of the basis of your kit?
I would say so. Yeah. I can. I could shoot an entire movie just with what's in my right hand here. Not necessarily like the cameras and all this kind of stuff, but that could get me through an entire picture.
And What memories come to mind when you look at this pouch?
When I look at that, I think I actually think of Star Wars weirdly because we as the department actually had these pouches commissioned for us on that job and so this was a kind of crew gift, that was quite a big moment in my career.
That's so nice.
Yeah, shooting that because obviously it's so big from my childhood.
So James, now that I've got a better understanding of what exactly a cinematographer does, I would love to hear more about some of your experiences on set. Mm-hmm. So most casual film watchers will understand that there are certain directors who have recognisable styles or a personal style. Mm-hmm. As a cinematographer, what's it like working with directors who are more hands-on about what they want?
I'll always be able to give my opinion on something if I don't agree, and I am quite opinionated, to be honest. But executing a director's vision, it's our responsibility. And some directors do have a very clear, distinct understanding of how they want things to look. And that can be very efficient. And if we're all on board with the same style, then it's fantastic. But I also do like the sort of challenge and the process of finding a look as well with the director.
I can imagine because of the nature of your role and essentially what you're employed to do, you have quite a clear idea of what is possible, what can actually be achieved. Does it ever cause conflict if you and the director have a different interpretation of what will end up on camera?
I mean, to say that it wouldn't cause tension, it would be a lie. However, when you meet the director to discuss the film at the beginning, or essentially like a job interview, they're interviewing you, but also secretly you're interviewing them as well to see if you're on the same page and if you've got similar sensibilities. And you try and sort of discover a common language at that stage, so you don't find out halfway through filming that the director always wanted it in black and white and I wanted it in Technicolor, or I wanted it in widescreen and they wanted it in 4:3. So that is what I mean about finding that look in prep.
I want to talk to you about All Quiet on the Western Front because it's a film that earned you both an Academy Award and a BAFTA for Best Cinematography. So woo, congratulations! Rightly so I should say. But for those who haven't seen it, it's set in 1914 Germany, right? And it really showcases the brutality of war. So as a cinematographer, what are the challenges that come with portraying a film that is as intense as this one? And it's in parts, I would say, difficult to watch. So how do you go about trying to get that right?
Well, it was very difficult to shoot, to be honest. It was one of the most... We shot it during COVID, and we were actually in the trenches. Obviously, we weren't being shot at by sort of live rounds or anything. Everyone got to go home back to their own beds in the evening. But it was quite a brutal film to try and shoot. But not only that, from the logistical kind of standpoints, and the mud and all that, and the rain and all the conditions, because we did shoot it as well in the winter, so it was absolutely it was freezing for most of it. But the subject matter of what we were filming every single day was it does sort of get you at the end of it. When you're shooting people in a war zone environment, it can get to you. It was pretty harrowing, and there was one week or 2 weeks, but maybe a 10-day period or something like that, where every single day we had a death of another character, because they essentially all die in the movie, and we were sort of shooting these like horrible, brutal deaths, like one after the other, and like ticking them off, like it was. And that got to us quite badly. All the sort of gore and blood and things like that. Yeah.
It sounds like you have to really go, like, immerse yourself into what you're filming and what you're creating in order for it to be a successful job. But how do you protect yourself, or how do you compartmentalize that?
Filming very much does take over your life. I would be doing anyone in this business a disservice if I said that it's an easy job.
Yeah, and you don't just go home and
yeah. And so, and you're basically on call kind of 24/7. Do you know what I mean? If the director decides to call me at 2:00 in the morning with a fantastic new idea, you know, I kind of am duty bound to answer the phone. You know, but the other thing is, because it's so all-consuming, and films traditionally take sometimes like a year in production, in pre-production, production, and a bit of post. I mean, the picture I've just finished, I think I was on it for nearly the best part of a year. So if you're going to dedicate a year of your life to something, it's got to be right. It has to be right. You can't just say, oh, I've got another film, another script's just come in, and you know, if I were to start, even though it's quite sort of morbid way of looking at it, but if I were to actually start thinking, how many years have I got left, not only in my career but in my life, and then you have to basically assign a year to a film, it suddenly makes you really think about, you know, have I got another 10 movies in me? I've got 15 movies. I don't, you know, I don't know, because also you have to have intense sort of resting periods in between pictures, because you know, working 16-hour days, it takes its toll.
If we go back to All Quiet on the Western Front for a second, you were talking about the scenes in the trenches, and one of the epic battle scenes specifically, it really feels like you're there with these soldiers. It's extreme, it's really chaotic. How is something like that filmed? How do you capture the essence of battle like that?
It was very important for us from the beginning to put the audience in the trenches. You know, I know it sounds so cliche to say we really want the audience to feel like they are in the battle, in the, you know. So shooting it, we shot it on large format, which is a larger sensor size than the traditional 35mm film, but we used wider angle lenses than one may normally use, because it really kind of reflects our true field of view, at least from my opinion.
No, you get that. You get that from the film.
And if I were to do a close up and say the camera is where that camera is at the moment, and it's framed on me like that, you naturally feel like you're removed. It feels like an enhanced POV. You know, it feels like you're on a longer lens. You're further away from the subject. But if you actually go on a wider lens and move the audience, and therefore the camera, more into our space, our peripherals, kind of, you know, our sort of zone, as it were, then we feel like we're actually engaged a bit more.
Because it gives the eyeball effect.
Not just the eyeball effect. It's you know, it feels like this, for example, is a pretty you know, socially comfortable distance for two people to be talking. So if I were to do an over the shoulder and put the camera there, then the audience actually really does get a good grasp of the sort of intimacy of this setting. So on All Quiet, we shot it very much from a sort of an audience's, a soldier's perspective. The camera was very rarely on a crane, you know, sort of showing some big vantage point. It was very much always locked onto Paul Balmer, who was the lead character in the movie, very much at his eye level, you know, on his shoulder, very much in his space. So the audience is experiencing things in real time, like he is.
You've also worked on the Emmy-nominated TV series The Acolyte, which again got rave reviews, and it's one of my favourite series, actually. Could you tell me a bit about working on that series and what that was like for you?
It was a bit of a special sort of seminal moment for me, because it is a Star Wars show.
Yeah.
And Star Wars was so instrumental in my sort of childhood. It was one of the things that truly like enraptured me to become a cinematographer, like that and James Bond and Indiana Jones. There's a small list of sort of films that I can kind of count on my hand that really were responsible for me getting into the craft. So the idea of of, shooting a close up on a Wookiee, or being in the cockpit of a spacecraft, or even shooting a lightsaber battle. I mean, that was like pinch me moments, and I had to sort of remind myself that it is a job as well. Like I'm not there.
You're at work, James. You're at work.
Exactly. But I remember shooting a camera test of a Wookiee, and I just basically went to the toilet and sort of burst into tears with kind of, but in a nice way. Do you know what I mean? Because I was just like, I can't believe what I'm doing.
We are, of course, living in a streaming era where the audience expectations for something online are on par with a movie that debuts in the cinema. How has that changed your work as a cinematographer?
Not at all, to be honest.
Yeah?
I still turn up to work on a movie or a streaming series with a camera, with some lenses, with some lights, with a crew, and with a script, with a director, with actors. If anything, it's actually opened up a lot more possibilities. I mean, what would the likelihood have been that I would have actually shot a Star Wars movie? Like, it's most likely like 1,000 to 1, right? But the fact that there was a Star Wars television series at the time, and I managed to get a few episodes on that, it's delivered one of my childhood dreams. Because there's so much out there, so many projects, it gives us a good opportunity to hone our craft.
Earlier in our conversation, you were speaking about living in a time where people are filming content more than ever before. And that's true for the social media influencer using TikTok to release a short film, through to 28 years later being recorded on an iPhone. What do you think is the future of cinematography?
I think that it will always come down to the basics, which is a camera is essentially a light-proof box that has a capturing device. If it be a piece of film stock, or if it's an actual digital sensor. So the fundamentals will always change, but the technology will keep on flourishing. And I think that there will always be an appetite for a cinema experience, and because it is super immersive, it's social. It's I don't know if you've ever sat in a cinema by yourself and watched a movie, but it's actually quite a lonely experience where there's something about an atmosphere of everyone experiencing something all at the same time. But I also just did a little short film for Apple, and utilising the Vision Pro headset, where we shot on a 180-degree camera, basically. So the audience can actually be their own sort of camera operator, as it were. So you actually look around, and it's very, very, very immersive. And that's very interesting technology. But like everything, it's not right for some projects, and some projects could really benefit from that kind of technology. So the future of cinematography, I don't know, I'm excited to see where it's going to go, to be honest.
James, talking to you today, I can genuinely see how much you love working in film. But I think the real question is your film trivia as impressive as your portfolio?
Oh my God. Right, okay.
Yeah, we're getting down to the nitty-gritty here on Out of Frame. You've chosen a specialist subject within the world of film and TV before coming here today. And now is time to answer 3 questions, right? We're putting your knowledge to the test. And your subject is the iconic film franchise, Star Wars. I mean, you've mentioned it enough.
Sure.
You've set yourself up.
Yeah.
How you feeling?
Good.
You have sprinkled this conversation with references to the Star Wars franchise, and I think it's fair to say that a lot of people live and die by the cult classic. Why do you love it so much?
Because it is a real good old-fashioned fable. It's a real it's a classic story of sort of good and evil.
That's gorgeous. I've got 3 questions for you. They're multiple choice, don't worry. And there's nothing on the line. Just your pride. Are you ready?
Yes.
Okay, let's do this. Question 1. According to Luke, confronting what is the destiny of a Jedi? Is it A, responsibility, B, fear, or C, evil?
I would say fear.
Ding, 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 ding. It's a strong start. That's the correct answer. It's a central theme in the Star Wars franchise. So the Jedi Code teaches that confronting fear allows a Jedi to grow, gain self-insight, and take steps towards mastering a connection with the Force. So, you know what? Now, you're not going to get 0, so you're fine.
That's good.
Question number 2.
Yeah.
Of the 9 Star Wars films, how many did George Lucas direct? Is it A, 4, B, 8, or C, 3?
Well, he did the prequel trilogy and he did A New Hope. So 4.
It is 4.
Yeah.
It is. Yeah, even though he played a major hand throughout the series, he was actually only a director for 4 of them. Well done. Okay, one last question. In the opening scene of The Empire Strikes Back, Luke is riding what animal?
A Tauntaun.
He didn't even let me give him the options. It was A, Tauntaun, B, a Sarlacc, or C, a Sampa. And of course, the answer is a Tauntaun. And it's set on the snow-covered planet Hoth, where the Rebel Alliance has a base. You're good. You're good. Well done. Well done. 3 out of 3. It's
I'm a geek. I'm a geek.
No. You just know what you know. James, I'm sure there are going to be people listening to our conversation who would love to do the work that you do. A lot of people I speak to on this podcast recommend attending film school as a good first step into entering the film industry. What do you think film school taught you, and what would you say actually is the best way to get the most out of it?
Film school taught me the fundamentals, the technical fundamentals, and it also gave me access to equipment that you wouldn't normally have access to. So proper motion picture film cameras, the lights, or the grip equipment, things like that, which you can obviously go out and hire, but you really need to be a professional in order to operate these things safely and well. So it's not like, my next door neighbour could just go and hire a Technocrane for a day. It doesn't sort of work like that. But I think the main thing I got out of film school was a community of people. I'm still good friends with some of my classmates even today, but because we were all in the same boat, but I actually left film school with a little mini showreel because there was no one really in my year that wanted to be a cinematographer. So I ended up shooting, everyone wanted to be a director. So I ended up shooting everyone's films essentially. And when we graduated, people were struggling to find a position on a movie and things like that. So just to have a little infrastructure and a little community of people that all kind of looked out for each other and could recommend for work and things like that really, really helped.
You touched on it a bit there. So once you leave film school, sometimes it can be quite difficult to make what you love into a career. What would you recommend a good cinematographer do if they're between jobs, if they're looking for work so that they can keep their skills up?
There's so much more literature on cinematography now than there ever has been. I would say go to screenings, things like the British Society of Cinematographers have a club where they will screen a film, for example, like All Quiet, and then I would sit down and I'd do a Q&A afterwards. And also watch movies. That's one of the most important things, just watch movies.
Earlier in our conversation, you spoke about how your personal life has impacted your work. You mentioned having dyslexia and autism and how because of that, you have to work in a certain way that suits you. So what have you learned over the years about working with people who think differently? And how do you think the industry can best support people with neurodiversity in particular?
You work and meet with such a broad variety of people. It does kind of arm you or give you the skills to be very patient with people, to learn how to communicate effectively and well, and also be sensitive to people's needs and requirements, So I think instead of thinking that something's wrong with you, just think that you're actually just different. For a creative person, it's, for me, the perfect place to thrive.
James, I've loved speaking to you today.
Thank you very much. Likewise.
I've learned so much about the crucial work that goes into being a cinematographer, genuine things that I didn't know before. Before you go, though, I would love to ask a closing piece of advice from you. So what is the number one thing that you wish you knew when you first started working in the film and TV industry?
I thought at the beginning that it was more of a job. Not that I ever wanted it to be a job. For me, it was always going to be a passion, but I didn't realise how much you have to put into it in order to succeed, I would say. Dealing with the long hours and the politics is something that they don't really teach you at film school. But advice for someone coming in, you just have to be very persistent and you have to annoy yourself, basically. It's very, very, very easy to give up sometimes and say, do you know what, this isn't for me anymore. And I've been in that position many, many, many times, especially as a young filmmaker, where I was working for free and just to simply get a credit and experience. And my parents were literally saying, when are you going to get a real job, kind of thing. And I was on a knife's edge of actually caving in and saying, oh, no, I'm going to do something else, But if you really stay strong and really have faith, then I'm a believer that, the universe will sort of give it to you,
Thank you so much for joining me today. And thank you for listening and watching. We'll be back next week where I'll be speaking to another incredible person who works in a below-the-line film and TV role. In the meantime, we would love to hear from you. What question do you have when it comes to working in this industry? And what other job roles do you want to hear from? Drop us a message at We Are CrewHQ on Instagram and TikTok. Until next time, take care.